my grandmother had a sister, and her sister never had any children and never had a husband. And she was a very, very nice lady, and she lived alone in a beautiful house. And the house was actually my great-grandfather's house, who did really well for himself before communism came. Now, eventually communism came to Romania, and he lost much of the land, right? It was collectivized. However, eventually he got some of the land back. Not him, but his children got some of the land back after communism fell. The house was pretty much always in someone from my family, and someone always lived there. That was never really taken, but it was a beautiful house. It wasn't necessarily big, but it was just the craftsmanship was absolutely wonderful. And Elizabeth, my grandmother's sister, ARRR, lived there. And Elizabeth, we just loved her. She cooked really good, and she was very nice. Sometimes she acted a little goofy, and you know, as kids we would love that. And she was just a very kind person with us, at least. And anyway, she was a very frugal lady, kept the house absolutely clean as a whistle, and it was just always fun to be there. And yeah, I have very fond memories. Nonetheless, after hyperinflation happened, after the Romanian government hyperinflated our currency, the Romanian lei, she passed away. And after she passed away, because the house was really in my great-grandfather's name, on my great-grandfather's name, and there was many heirs to it, it had to be sold. And before it got sold, of course, we had to clean up and get the personal stuff out, and kind of like memorabilia especially. And I remember helping my mother, my aunt, my cousins, my sister, my father, my uncle, everybody was there, and we were just like cleaning the house, getting stuff out of the house because somebody's gonna purchase it. And in the middle room, which actually had access to the patio where I spent a lot of time, and I remember usually the patio door was closed, and they would use the side door from the kitchen. And well, nonetheless, I went through that door because that day was open, because of course we just, you know, constantly packing stuff out of the house. And I was alone in that room, and to my left in the corner as I walked into that room, there was this almost like a shrunk, or how do you call it in English, but basically somewhere where people keep their clothes, right? And it had drawers, and you know, I think I just helped clean up the linen in the house and put them in bags and whatever. And I was pulling out the bottom drawer. So I remember the bottom drawer, and she kept some linen there, and I was pulling out some linen and packing stuff, and I found a stack of cash, right? And that stack of cash wasn't that big, but I just like looked, that drawer looked too funny because it looked shorter than the rest of the drawers. And of course, being a young lad, I kind of was like forcing, why isn't this coming all the way? And what's happening here? Why is this short? And I was like moving and moving the back wall of that. And it turned out that back wall of the drawer was a fake wall. And behind it, there was a little compartment. Not too big, but just enough where that little old lady could stack her cash. And she did. Pretty much all 10,000 Romanian lei banknotes. So at some point, that was the highest denominated banknote in Romania. And she kept on stacking for quite some time, I bet, because she lived a frugal life. She didn't have a lot of money, but she did lend out or lease out the land that she inherited. And I believe she probably sold off some of that and kind of lived off of that at some point. And basically it was for maybe 3 inches high stacks of cash of the highest denominated Romanian lei, right? And I constantly went back in memory there and tried to calculate it and look at the numbers and how much it would have been worth when she could have stacked it, right? And how much it could have been when she started stacking, and when she finished, you know, when she passed away, how much was it then? So I kind of like calculating. It's very hard because hyperinflation was already happening when she was still alive, and then it really kicked in once she passed. So my calculation, and these are, I think these are fair estimates, probably at some point it was worth for her around, if I would want to translate it in purchasing power in current US currency, I would say maybe current purchasing power, you know, back in the Romanian economy would be around $65,000 maybe. That's what I came back to the number, maybe around 65,000. So at some point that was a pretty good sum of money, especially cash, that she stacked, right? It was probably even more, well, purchasing wise back in Romania, because things were cheap back then, I would say. Nonetheless, that could have been the amount that she stacked, and probably was way more when she started stacking, but because of hyperinflation it would have probably lost at least half of its value, right? So it would have ended up in around that area of $65,000. The issue was that after she passed, a couple of years have passed before the house got sold, and we went in to clean the rooms and get the memorabilia and all that stuff. And by the time we found that, right, of course, you know, my mom and my cousin, everybody was like, oh, what did you find? And I was so happy and eager to show it to them, right? And well, it turns out in the meantime, the new Romanian lei has been issued, right? So when she was stacking the highest denominated currency, it was no longer that one, right? So we had the 10,000, the 50,000, the 100,000, the 1 million, the 5 million Romanian lei, and so on and so forth. Eventually, once the zeros got cut, the 10,000 Romanian lei, the red one that she stacked, became a new currency of 1 Romanian lei, right? And by that time, probably 1 Romanian lei would have bought you a few loaves of bread, right? And at the end, maybe just 1 loaf of bread. So by that time, when my cousin went to the bank to swap it into new currency, I think the only thing that it would have bought would be a bicycle, basically. So it wasn't that much at all. I remember, I think the money went to her renovating her grave or something like that. Anyway, that kind of stuck with me for a long time. This was a core memory made for me, right? And I just remember those big bills, the red ones, of 10,000 Romanian lei. So I already knew about hyperinflation, inflation beforehand, and just learning from my father about inflation and what my family went through before in multiple events in, you know, history and global history. So it wasn't new to me. I knew it was what was happening, right? However, that just struck more because now I could kind of time travel in my head back and forth. When I knew the lady, she could have been stacking, right? She lived a very frugal life. She didn't spend that money. You know, she could have spent it, lived a better life, somewhat better life, right? And now it was wasted. That energy that she put in, or my grandfather, great-grandfather put in to work the land, or, you know, build a house and so on and so forth. Everything that wasn't made into physical items that could have been kept throughout the years, all that labor got recycled back into Into the state that issued the currency, into paying off the debt of Romania through inflation. And you really have to think about that, because what happens is that productivity gets stolen, or gets stolen back. I don't know how to say it, but that's what's really happening. The productivity of your grandfather is no longer there because they stole it through inflation. The banksters, the politicians, and the state, right? And maybe the currency is theirs, right? Because they're printing it. Give back to Caesar what's his, right? But the productivity isn't. The productivity would have been your grandfather's, would have been my great aunt's. And let me give you another example, because I was looking at when the Andrew Jackson $20 bill was issued. And I'm gonna look it up, but actually it was in 1928, I believe. And I believe the Andrew Jackson was printed or appeared on the $20 bill in 1928. So in 1928, a $20 bill in current purchasing power would be roughly around $324. Okay, so around $324. So that means a $20 bill back then would be worth more than the largest bill right now. And let's give another hypothetical, right? Maybe your grandfather stacked, let's just say, 200 bills. So that's 200 times 324 in current purchasing power. So let's just say, wow, that came close. 200 times 324 purchasing power units would be, in current amount, $64,000. $64,800. So here's what your grandfather is thinking, back in 1928. I stacked 200 $20 bills, and I'm gonna leave this to my, heirs, to my granddaughter or grandson. And I'm gonna put it in an envelope, and I'm gonna write, who I'm leaving this for. And then when he or she's born and gets of age, he's gonna get this envelope, and he's gonna get 200 $20 bills, because that would have been worth $64,000. And he's thinking that he's gonna buy a house from it, or he's gonna, put it towards a down payment, or buy some land and, grow tomatoes, or whatever 1928 person would think back then. And the only problem is he put away 200 $20 bills, right? So by the time you find it right now in 2024, that's actually just $4,000, because it's 200 $20 bills, which is $4,000. However, I was said $65,000 because he would have thought that $4,000 back then would have purchased $64,000 worth of stuff, and he was correct. The problem is that through that 100 years, the purchasing power of the US dollar has evaporated. And of course it did not evaporate. Not at all. It was recycled back into the monetary system through the Federal Reserve, inflating away your grandfather's productivity, recycling it back into the system so they can pay off the debt. Okay? So that's what happened in this hypothetical. So that's what happened. Now, let's take another example. Another example would be if he would think that, well, you know, these dollar bills are nice and fine, and maybe he would have loved Andrew Jackson on it, but instead of putting away paper dollar bills, he would put away silver coins, 1 ounce pure silver coins. You know, I know that may be a different time and you maybe need to think about not pure, but whatever. Let's just say that he would have bought ounces of silver. So for that current value of 200 individual $20 bills or $4,000, he would have bought silver and leave you that. Now the price of silver back in 1928 was actually 55 cents. So that would mean that with that $4,000, he would be able to buy 7,272. Let's just say 7,200 ounces of silver. And instead of leaving you $4,000, he's gonna leave you 7,200 ounces of silver. And that would be currently worth $172,000. So instead of leaving you bills that would be worth $4,000, that instead of that, he would be leaving you ounces of silver that would be now currently worth $172,000. Okay, so what's the lesson here? The lesson is that the banks, like a river bank, control the currency, right? And the flow of currency. And you may be holding currency, but you're not holding stored up productivity of your grandfather, of your father, or even your productivity. That productivity will be recycled back to the system to pay off the debt that they have taken on for wars and idiotic projects that the banks lobby the politicians for. So if you want to hold, or at least somewhat retain, your productivity, you have to think outside of the box. And I was just giving you the example of silver, but it could be many other things, right? Alright, so that's it for tonight, and talk to you next time. However, please subscribe to the channel and you'll find links for Bitcoin Cash and other cryptocurrencies, and even a link to my Patreon if you're interested in more stories from my life and experience, and maybe some of the lessons that I have drawn from them. Talk to you next time.